And toxic resilience is really a manifestation of hustle culture. And
Right.
so when you hear the word resilience, it's actually not true resilience that people are describing. It's
Mm.
toxic resilience because true resilience is about rest and recovery.
Ask anyone how they've been lately, and if you dig deep enough, feeling stressed or burnt out are likely to come up. Stress and burnout have seemingly become mainstays in our lives, and yet our ways of coping in physiologically and psychologically effective ways could definitely use an improvement. Some might even say a reset. Today's guest was named 100 Women to Know in America for her work dedicated to helping people manage their stress and burnout better. This Harvard stress expert's name is Dr. Aditi Nerurkar, and she is the author of The 5 Resets: Rewire Your Brain and Body for Less Stress and More Resilience, which she says she wrote to empower people in making meaningful change in their lives. She's been featured in publications like the New York Times and NPR and appeared on Good Morning America, the Mel Robbins podcast, and A Diary of a CEO. Dr. Aditi is a compassionate advocate for mental health, supplying actionable, practical, and science-backed ways to reset the stress and burnout that is so commonplace these days. And we are looking forward to what she has to say. Welcome to the Asian Boss Girl podcast, Dr. Aditi.
It is such a pleasure to join you, Janet. I'm a really big fan.
Thank you so much. We are big fans of you, and I particularly am a big wellness fanatic, so I'm really excited for today's conversation. I'd love if we could just start out by you sharing with our listeners what inspired you to become a physician and what specifically compelled you to research stress management.
So, prior to becoming a doctor who specializes in stress, I was a stressed patient looking for answers and I couldn't find any. I was a medical resident working 80 hours a week, seeing death and dying on a daily basis. And back
Wow.
then, 25 years ago, we didn't use words like self-care or boundaries. Like that was not part of our lexicon. In
Yeah.
fact, what I was taught at a very early stage of my medical training, I will never forget this. It's like those moments in time that are, it's like a core memory for me. A professor got up and said, pressure makes diamonds, and you are all diamonds in the making. So as
Hmm.
you go through your medical training, working 80 hours a week and seeing things that really no mere mortal should need to see, right? Like horrible things in the trauma bay, in the ER, et
Yeah.
cetera, just keep that in mind. And so I
Mm.
was a diamond in the making. And so anytime anything happened or it was a really difficult call, I would just say, it's okay. I'm, shining and I'm just going
Mm.
forward and I'm going to gleam. And then my diamond cracked. I was a 30-hour call, quite brutal that particular day and evening. I was the senior resident in the cardiac ICU, rounding on all of my patients, taking care of everyone else's heart, not really thinking about my own, not my
Yeah.
heart, my mind, my body. And I suddenly felt a stampede of wild horses across my chest. And so it really knocked the wind out of me. I immediately sat down, I was flushed, and I was very terrified. The nurse that I was working with, who I had worked with many times before, gave me some orange juice. And, I just said, oh, it's probably low blood glucose. I didn't have a good breakfast because I was on call overnight in
Yeah.
the hospital.
Mm.
And feeling passed within seconds. Never happened again at work. But those palpitations, that feeling of like, a stampede of wild horses followed me night after night at home as I was going to sleep. And then I finally went to go see a
Mm.
doctor. They did the full workup, heart ultrasound, EKG, blood test for anemia, thyroid, you name it, they did it. And then my doctor said, very reassuringly with a big smile, everything checks out great. You're fine. It's probably just stress. Just go home and
Mm.
relax. I know it's hard. Medical training, we've all been there. And so I went home and I thought, okay, try to relax. What does that mean? So I
Yeah.
did all the things. I got a massage, did retail therapy, hung out with friends, had dinners, took a vacation, but nothing seemed to help. And
Mm.
then when I finally decided, okay, it's time for me to put my scientist hat on, really dive into what is stress, how does it affect the brain and the body, and then I uncovered, all of this research. And then I started applying it to my own life. And over, I would say, it took about 2 to 3 months for me to get out of my stress struggle by using a lot of these strategies I learned through the science. And then I vowed to become the doctor I needed during that difficult time. So when patients would come to me, I wouldn't say, it's just stress, try to relax. I would have some real actionable and science-backed strategies. And so that's what I did. I became the doctor I needed and really studied very deeply the science of stress. What is the biology? How does it affect your brain and your body? So now I've been doing this work for several decades since then, and my palpitations and that stampede of wild horses has never come back. Of course, I've faced stress, as we all have.
Yeah.
Sometimes very difficult moments of stress. And then I figured out, I walk the talk. So I use all of these things in my daily life to help me get out of those difficult experiences again and again and again.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, as you're saying, you seem to be referring to a difference between stress and burnout. And I would love if you could talk a little bit more about what the difference between those two things are.
If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have said there is a very clear delineation between stress and burnout. But I would say right now in this moment, we are seeing unprecedented rates of both stress and burnout. And that distinction is becoming very blurry. The reason is because your brain, when a human brain, your brain during periods of acute stress, your brain is really well equipped to handle short bursts of stress, your brain and body both. And so you rise up to the occasion. There's a small, we won't get too scientific, but I can just say that there's a small part of your brain. It's shaped like an almond. It's called the amygdala. And it's this deep part of your brain that really governs your emotional state, your stress response, which we also call in science your fight or flight response. And that amygdala gets fired up. You take on whatever short-term stress you have, and then it comes back to baseline, or at least that's how your brain and body are designed to be optimal in terms of handling stress. However, over the past 4 to 5 years, we've had one onslaught after the other, so there hasn't been a return to baseline. And that, when your amygdala is chronically elevated and that it's activated and the volume is turned way up, that's how burnout can set in. And so what's really tricky now is that the definition of burnout is changing. When you think about someone with burnout, Janet, like you can imagine, right? Like if I said, what's someone with burnout? You would say, probably someone who's apathetic, not very motivated, bored, unproductive. That kind of classic features and classic picture of burnout.
Right.
Unfortunately, now in modern day, burnout, because of this ongoing stress, the way burnout looks is really different. It's hard to identify in yourself and your, loved ones or colleagues because modern day burnout has a different face. So in one study, 60% of people who had burnout had an inability to disconnect from work as their main feature of burnout. And that doesn't fit with what you typically think of as, someone with burnout. I would also say that stress, another kind of like this statistic is what started me on my whole journey to really dive into stress, is that 60 to 80% of all doctor's visits have a stress-related component. And this is like old data, but only 3% of doctors counsel for stress. And now we know the numbers are even higher. So in the general population, we are not even talking about doctor's visits, but when they do survey upon survey of just everyday people who aren't in their doctor's office, but just on the street, we see numbers of like 70, 74% of people with stress and burnout. In one survey in the UK, 90% of people had severe stress and burnout this past year alone. So if you are feeling any of these things and wondering, could I have stress? Could I have burnout? Just know that you are not alone and that it is not your fault. And very much, if you're feeling any of these things, you are the rule and not the exception.
With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. What was interesting about what you said is that oftentimes one symptom of burnout is someone continues to try to work harder. I'm sure many individuals can relate to that as well. You already shared a little bit about just maybe having repeated stress equating to burnout, and maybe why you know the state of the world is causing us to feel this. But what do you think are like some specific sources of this elevated stress and burnout in our current era?
So there are lots of reasons. It's really complex, right? It's like on one hand, very complex. On the other hand, it's not complex at all because we've all lived through for the past 4 to 5 years. We have lived through an onslaught. It's been one thing after the other. There was a global pandemic. We've come out of the global pandemic. There were several, we had a racial reckoning here in the US. There have been several climate disasters all over the world. We've had humanitarian crises. And because we are all connected, hyper connected 24/7, your brain doesn't recognize the difference with something happening 6,000 miles away or something happening in your neighborhood. That amygdala just fires up.
Yeah.
And a lot of the reasons why many of us are feeling worse now, much worse now than we were, say, in 2020 or even 2021, is because your brain is built like a dam. And so what happens is during times of acute stress, like back in 2020, we were all quarantined. I know we don't really want to talk about the pandemic and go there because like we're over it. I get that, but it's about context, right? So back in 2020, we were all quarantined. We thought, okay, it's going to be like a 3-week thing and then we'll be back to regular life. When you are in a period of acute stress, you shore up your internal reserves and you keep it together at all costs. That's what the human brain does. I've had patients who've had cancer and they would see their oncologist and get the bad news. They'd start chemotherapy, radiation, come into my office, never shed a tear. And then when they get that clean bill of health and, hey, your cancer is cured, congratulations, they're in my office the next day weeping. And that's because your brain, the human brain, during periods of acute stress, we just keep it together. Your brain is like a dam. When you feel psychologically safe, when the crisis has passed, the dam breaks and your true pent-up emotions can really emerge, and it's often a deluge. So now in this moment of time, we have lived through collectively, individually and collectively, lived through that real reckoning and acute stress. We all kept it together. Of course, many people, had mental health challenges, but it's no surprise to me that we are seeing a rise in mental health issues, whether it be stress and burnout, anxiety, depression now compared to back then, simply because all of that is coming up and, collectively the dam has broken.
Yeah. Thank you for walking us through that. I think hearing you recount specifically what is happening and to explain how it's impacting us on a physiological level, I think is really helpful. Sometimes when it comes to, I think, mental health and emotions and stress, it can feel very intangible. And so, it's like, to your point, when you're speaking to our listeners about not feeling guilty or embracing the fact and being able to recognize if you're burnt out or if you're experiencing stress, I think that's so important. So hearing you talk through these very real events and, science-backed reasons for why we would be feeling this, I think is incredibly helpful.
I will also say, Janet, that, yes, you are right that it feels, there's a sense of validation, right? It's normalizing this experience that we're all going through. There's also, unfortunately, a lot of shame when it comes to stress and burnout.
Right,
and I always think back to when I was seeing patients and I had a packed waiting room, everyone was struggling. They were coming to see me for stress and burnout. No one was talking to each other. It was a silent waiting room. They would come into my office, the door would close, and then that person would share what they were going through. And if you look at the data, 70% in some studies, another study 74, others 90%. That means that in a room of 30 people, 21 people are struggling with stress and burnout. So really the data shows that we are not alone. And unfortunately, it's the stress paradox that is happening. I saw it in my clinic. I've seen it now on a much larger scale, where we are all going through the same experience, collectively going through this experience, and yet it feels incredibly isolating. And that's a real paradox because there's so much shame. And so I hope that this conversation today, to those listening, you feel less shame because truly we are all, you and me and everyone else, based on the data. We've all had, hands up if you've dealt with stress and burnout, like the
Yeah,
whole
most
room will
definitely.
raise their hand. Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Raising my hand over here. Because you're simply a human being
right.
dealing with all of this stuff. And most of us have never dealt with a lot of the things that we have had to face. The human brain is not designed, like I said, it's designed for short term stress. But this long term, unrelenting, cyclical stress with no moment of respite,
Mm.
no, your human brain needs rest and recovery.
When it comes to exuding confidence, it is about mindset and attitude. And in order to get there, I need to feel comfortable in my clothes. Yes, the style of your outfit matters, but honestly, it's the underwear that makes all the difference. I want to thank today's sponsor, Honeylove, for giving me the comfort and therefore confidence I need when I'm out at events. Their bras are super lightweight with supportive bonding instead of uncomfortable wires. Their wire-free bra allows freedom, flexibility, and comfort. And the fabric is so soft, you will forget you're even wearing a bra. For a limited time only, you can get Honeylove on sale. Get 20% off your entire order with our exclusive link, honeylove.com/abg. I am in love with their best-selling crossover bra, which gives all of the support of traditional bras, but without using all of that uncomfortable underwire. Plus, the mesh detailing adds a nice touch of sexy. My other fave is their V bra, which is great if you're looking for a more relaxed lounge bra. It's designed to lift and separate with molded cups, so you don't get the uniboob effect. No thank you. Honeylove is not just supporting women, it's empowering women. Treat yourself to the best bras in the market and save 20% off at honeylove.com/abg. Use our exclusive link to get 20% off honeylove.com/abg to find your perfect fit. After you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. Elevate your comfort, elevate your style with bras that empower your lifestyle of flexibility. Speaking of continual stress, oftentimes when we experience stress, it maybe happens during a busy season. So, it's easy to say, oh, I'm just feeling this because I have maybe, like a big life event happening or I have a big thing happening at work. And it's easy to kind of push it to the side and not address the stress. Can you share with us what the physical and also the psychological consequences are if we don't recognize that we are in a perpetual state of stress and address it?
You have to kind of tiptoe in. That's a great way to frame it, the way you've framed it. It's like, yes, it is important to have that sense of self-awareness and say, yes, I am really going through stress and burnout. But often you don't know that you're going through stress and burnout when it's
Right.
happening to you because it feels so awful and also
Mm.
because of your amygdala. Your amygdala is focused on survival and self-preservation. It's about immediate needs, what's happening in the here and now. It is
Mm.
cave person mode because quite literally your amygdala is just trying to keep you safe. And so when you feel a sense of stress, you are actually feeling a sense of danger and threat. So when you are describing this, sense of like, oh, I might be feeling this way. What should I do about it? That is part of the prefrontal cortex. So if you put your hand on your forehead, it's that area right behind that part of your forehead. And that's called your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is about future thinking, strategic thinking, complex problem solving. And when you are feeling that sense of stress, it is so, so difficult to shut off your amygdala and get into the prefrontal cortex again, simply because that's not biologically how your brain is designed, right? It's so easy to get in your own way.
Mm.
And so the first sort of tell for you, if you're like, do I feel this way? Is to think about something I call your canary in the coal mine. And we all have it. It's like you said, there are so many flavors of stress and burnout. And so some people who experience stress and burnout might have, so let's talk about the physical manifestations, and we can talk about all of these can be your canary in the coal mine. I'll kind of explain that in a second. So physical manifestations could be anything, head to toe. You could have headaches, neck pain, dizziness. You could have shoulder pain, back pain, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, gastric problems like heartburn, or GI issues like a sensitive stomach. You could have joint pain, fatigue, and on it goes. And that's like not even an exhaustive list. And then mental manifestations of stress and burnout, of course, anxiety, depression, insomnia, hypervigilance, irritability, quick to anger, emotional reactivity. On the flip side, like on the other side of the spectrum, you could be lethargic, really just unable. We call it psychomotor, either psychomotor agitation or psychomotor depression, meaning like either you could be really keyed up and like fidgety and anxious or super mellow to the point where like you're not really engaged and really care about much. So there are a million flavors of stress and burnout, and everyone is different. So some people might have no mental manifestations whatsoever. They're like, I'm fine, I'm not stressed and burned out, I don't feel it. But they keep having their gut issues or their
Ah,
headaches or, so really, first and foremost, if you are wondering if this is you, go see a doctor. I always have to say that, right? Because
yeah.
that's how I discovered that I had stress and burnout because I was sure that it was my heart. And in
Mm,
fact, it wasn't my heart. So I always say the first step is to go see a doctor because what if it is something that is, we call
right.
stress a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning like it's the last, you exclude everything else and then you say, oh, it's probably stress, which is
Mm,
why with me, the doctor did the full medical workup and said, oh, no, everything's checked out and it's fine. And so I would also kind of encourage you to think about this, what if you're like, what could mine be? What's
mhm.
like the thing that is my tell? Think about the story, The Canary in the Coal Mine. And so I'm not a history buff, but I really like this because it like made me realize, what's my canary in the coal mine? So back when coal miners, they would go into the mines and the air got bad, right? Because they're working and they're excavating. And as humans, we're just like, we keep working and toiling without realizing that there's something happening to us because we're just bad historians.
Yeah.
And so they would bring a caged bird, a canary, down in the mines. The canary would be singing, everything would be great. Canary would stop singing when the air got bad. And that was their first tell,
Mm,
like, oh, we should get out. They felt fine. They weren't coughing, nothing was happening. They would just say, oh, canary stopped singing. Time to get out of the mines and get our fresh air. And so think about what you, in your brain or your body,
mm,
what is your canary? What is something that is alerting you to, hey, hold on, I think you might have stress and burnout. For me, I didn't listen to my canary. And then it became a stampede of wild horses, like wave, like that happens too. But there are whispers that your brain and your body might be telling you. Now, after 25 years of doing this, my canary is actually when I'm like really irritable, or
mm,
my husband will often mention, like, I think it's time to do the resets again. Like, you've been in a really bad
mm.
mood, when you're cranky. So we
Yeah.
all have our different kind of canary. So paying attention to what that might be for you.
Mm,
And you can ask you can ask your loved ones, you can ask your colleagues, your friends, your family, because often they will tell you, oh my God. Or like they'll say, every time you're stressed, you feel really nauseous. Have you noticed
mm.
that? People will point it out to you.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very great tips, I think, for our listeners to be mindful of yourself and knowledgeable about, what is your canary in the coal mine. And if you have a hard time perceiving that on your, for yourself, that to turn to loved ones and to be receptive to any observations they might have. Hi, ABGs. Let's talk about rent. It is one of those unavoidable bills that we have to pay. But do you ever feel like you're just watching your money vanish into thin air? If so, check out Built Rewards. They have figured out a way to make paying rent more rewarding. Say goodbye to the money bonfire and hello to a renter's revolution with Built. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes or redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to built.com/ABG. That's JOINBILT.com/ABG. Make sure to use our URL so that they know we sent you. Join built.com/ABG to start earning points with your rent payments today. Dr. Aditi, you had also spoken about how there is, stress is like a biological, physical response, and that in many ways there is good stress. Can you talk a little bit about what's the difference between good and bad stress?
When you and I and we're chatting in conversation, and I'm like, oh, I had a really stressful day, or you say like, oh my God, it's been such a stressful week. What we're describing is bad stress, and there's two kinds of stress, and not all stress is created equal. And stress gets a bad rap. There's good, healthy stress. Scientifically, it's called adaptive stress, and it moves your life forward. So, what are examples of that? Rooting for your favorite sports team, making a new friend, getting a degree, or getting buying a new car, falling in love, getting a new home. having a roommate that you really like that you first meet and you're, moving in together. There are so many moments in your life that are a little bit stressful, but it's healthy, positive stress. It's moving your life forward. And that's all good. But then when that stress continues and kind of is like a runaway train, that's when it can become bad stress. And what is bad stress? Bad stress we call maladaptive stress. It's unproductive, dysfunctional, causes those canary symptoms that you might have. And really, it's like you have to just recognize that a little bit of healthy stress is positive. But when stress gets out of hand is when it becomes negative.
Yes, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can you also talk a little bit about the significance of toxic resilience and why do we need to be mindful of that?
So this is probably a tip that, as children of immigrants, and it's something that we have very much have been socialized to believe. And so when you think about resilience, like if you and I say that word, I mean, at least with me, like I cringe. I have a visceral response. You probably do too. When someone's like, Janet, be more resilient. You're like, that word. Oh, you're like, I roll like, please don't tell me to be more resilient. Because it's gotten a really, like over time, the definition of resilience has really changed. Like if someone said that to you in 2019, like, Janet, you're so resilient, you'd be beaming with pride because in fact, it's a positive word. It has a really positive connotation, but the definition has morphed and it's become something really sinister. So true resilience versus toxic resilience. So what is true resilience? True resilience, scientifically, it's your innate biological ability to adapt, recover, and grow in the face of life's challenges. And, it honors your boundaries, all of the things that we talked about, right? Like honors your ability to rest and recover, uses a lens of self-compassion. Contrast that to toxic resilience. So the reason you and I cringe and have these eye rolls when we hear toxic resilience is because that's the messaging that's particularly over the past, I would say 4 to 5 years. It's like, you can take on an extra deadline, you're resilient. Or, you can do more, you're resilient. So you hear that messaging all the time. And toxic resilience is like a mind over matter mindset. It's productivity at all costs. It's like the Energizer Bunny mentality in the US. It's like, just keep going, just keep going. Or in the UK, keep calm and carry on. Every country has its own brand of toxic resilience. And toxic resilience is really a manifestation of hustle culture. And so when you hear the word resilience, it's actually not true resilience that people are describing. It's toxic resilience. And so it's like we have to change the narrative around what is resilience anyway? Because true resilience is about rest and recovery. I mean, we're human beings, right? Like we're not meant, your brain has a biological need for rest and recovery. So when you hear things like, oh, just keep working 24/7, you're burnt out, you must not be that resilient. And that's like the great myth, the big resilience myth. It's like, people who are resilient can't get burned out. And if there's one thing to take away from our call today, it's that in fact, people who are resilient, yes, resilience is protective, but by no means is it enough to prevent burnout, by no means. And so if, look at the data, right? Like if resilience is your innate biological ability, which means innately we all have it as human beings. How is it that 70 to 90% of people, depending on the study, are facing stress and burnout? Are they not as resilient? Of course not. It just means that the system has failed us and there have been too many things that have been happening that your brain and your body don't get the respite they need to then bounce back.
Yeah, I love that. That was a very logically stated and makes complete sense that resilience is something that is innate to everyone. And, being able to recognize and stress or burnout does not necessarily mean that you are not resilient.
To all my wonderful parents and caregivers out there, let's talk about those unforgettable moments with your little ones. The first steps, the giggles, the boundless energy. But let's be real, with a growing and wild child, those moments can also mean unexpected messes, which is why I'm excited to share something that's been a lifesaver for us, Pampers Cruisers 360. Pampers Cruisers 360 is the must-have baby-proof diaper. These slide on like a pair of pants, unlike ordinary diapers with tabs or tapes that your escape artist can rip off. And trust me, thanks to its 360-degree stretchy waistband, it can help save you from some serious messes and keep your baby comfy. With up to 100% leak-proof protection, you can let your little one explore and play. And when it's time for a change, it's as easy as ripping the sides, rolling it up with a disposable tape on the back, and you're done. Simple as that. Try Pampers Cruisers 360 with the new Pampers Free and Gentle wipes for healthy baby skin. They're made from 100% plant-based cloth that grips the mess. With Free and Gentle, mess meets its match. Let your little one live wild and mess-free because every adventure should end in smiles, not cleanups. For trusted protection, trust Pampers, the #1 pediatrician recommended brand.
I would love now to talk a bit more about your special framework that you've created, the 5 resets. Can you give us an overview of what each of these resets are and why each one is so crucial for holistic health?
The 5 resets was a framework that I developed because in my 25 years of seeing patients, I saw, and again, being a stress patient myself, I saw that when you are in stress mode and your amygdala is on high alert, it's hard to get out of your own way. And you can't do the strategic thinking. And so really the 5 resets is a roadmap. It's a roadmap to get you out of that fight or flight mode that you may be in and to get you to a place away from survival and to truly just be thriving, even in the midst of like this, hellscape that we're all living through right now, right?
Yeah.
It sure feels like it, like some version of that in different, whether it's work or socially or home life, etc. It's just been a really difficult time for so many people.
Yeah.
And so the 5 resets offers 5 small but mighty mindset shifts that help you get out of that mode of like pure survival. And first, it's about understanding, hey, did I have stress and burnout? And so based on our conversation today, the answer is most likely yes. Yes, you do. And it's like, you have to figure out what your canary is, etc. And so there are 5 resets, and I can just read them to you if you would like. The first is get clear on what matters most. Mm-hmm. The second, find quiet in a noisy world. The third, sync your brain to your body. The fourth, come up for air. And the 5th is bring your best self forward. And so in this framework, there's about 15 science-backed strategies, and they all help you get out of that stress mode and back into, a better state. And so it's a way to transform your relationship with stress and burnout for good. Because like we can all use hacks here and there, and that's great, but like your brain and your body are too smart for hacks. So it's about using the biology based on what we've talked about to actively get you out of stress and burnout. And, I would love to spend 6 months in Bali on a surf holiday, but that's not the reality for me and likely isn't for many people. So it's like the 5 resets is like the next best thing.
Yeah. That's great. You've talked about how it's supposed to be easy and tangible and something you can apply directly in your life without having to take big breaks, which I think that is something that would be beneficial to all of us.
And I think another really important thing for me, Janet, is that because I have been a doctor for so many years and have seen so many different kinds of patients with varying resources, every single thing in the 5 resets is cost-free. So it's something that takes just a little bit of time, like 5 minutes to do some of the strategies, 2 minutes for some strategies, but every single thing is totally free because if we all had inexhaustible resources, like of course we could do, all these wonderful things like my Bali vacation, or let's say you want to, get a massage every day or go to acupuncture or go to yoga and all, it's a wonderful thing if you have the time and the means, but chances are like 99.999% of people don't, including me, including you. So you have to figure out, like bang for your buck, how can you get the most effective and practical strategies in the here and now, right in the middle of your messy, overscheduled life without like checking out for 6 months and going away. Because, like I joke about like taking a surf holiday to a tropical island because it's like always been my dream. But when you come back, you have to still deal with all this stuff when you're on your, when you're on your way back.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, being able to distinguish when taking a break or like a short trip, it can be re-energizing, but it may not solve what is causing you to experience the stress or the burnout. You've shared such wonderful examples of the 5 resets, but for some of our listeners out there who might, beyond thinking about themselves, are also thinking about maybe elder parents or their children who experience also levels of stress and burnout, are there any tips that you have for applying your framework to different age groups?
Yes, I do. So I love this question. Caregiving in one capacity or the other, we are all caregivers in some capacity. So some of us are caring for, like you said, elderly relatives. Others are caring for children. Others are caring for pets. Many of us are caregivers to family members or people in our community or friends.
Yeah.
There's so many ways that, if you're a people manager at work, you likely are caregiving in some capacity to your team as well.
Hmm.
And so really thinking about caregiving as an entity and honoring that, understanding that caregiving stress is real. It's a real thing that happens to you. It's not just like, oh, you're supposed to just keep filling from an empty, pouring from an empty cup.
Right.
Understanding that only when your cup is full can you then pour out of that cup to fill others' cups. And so figuring out ways you can use any of these resets for through that framework of caregiving.
Mhm.
And they are all meant because, when I was a medical resident working 80 hours a week, it was like I was caregiving in my profession and still figured out a way to manage my stress and burnout through these various resets. It's what I used, and I worked 80 hours a week. And so slowly you can bring all of these strategies into your life. So
Yeah.
the framework is that you have to first identify that yes, caregiving is causing me a lot of stress. We know that caregiving, it has a direct influence on your mood, anxiety, burnout, depression. It increases the risk of many things like mental health conditions,
Right.
simply because there's like that taxing element. Again, your brain isn't getting a break. So leading with self-compassion, Janet, is like always my number one piece of advice, really focusing on how you can lead through the lens of self-compassion, focusing first on yourself and how you can really take care of yourself before taking care of others.
Yes, yeah. I love that message. You definitely always have to pour into your cup first before being able to help anyone else. I'd love now to talk a little bit about a specific type of stress or anxiousness that people face, and that is, thinking about the future. And oftentimes when we think about the future, and if we go through different periods of life where our future seems unknown or uncontrollable, we might experience, intense feelings of overwhelm. What tips do you have for someone to manage this particular type of stress?
Oh, I love this question. One of the phenomena that we have been seeing over the past several years, particularly affecting young people, it's this idea of horizonlessness. It was something that I did a piece on. A journalist interviewed me for a piece on this I think it was like Elle magazine, if I'm not mistaken. I have to go back and see where that interview went. But it's this concept of like, you just, first you're anxious about your future, you may be, or you might say like, oh, what future? Forget it. Like things are just so bad right now. Like it's hard for you to even envision a future. And so there are so many varieties of that. And yes, I understand this because I have also very much like in my early training as a resident, and even now I wonder about the future for myself. I wonder as a mother, I wonder what is the future for our kids? And then I think more globally because I have a public health background, so I'm always thinking about like community-based stuff and global stuff. Like what's the future? I think about the climate, or I don't know, all of the things that are happening in the world. And it really does bum me out. I would say, if you can, yes, it is so important to think about complex problems and solving complex problems. Absolutely. Action really matters. So getting involved in some organization in some way to help you feel like, okay, I'm contributing, I'm doing something good. But how do you manage that stress? The reason you are feeling a sense of stress about the future is because anxiety is a future-focused emotion. And so when you feel anxious, we all have anxiety and anxiousness in lots of different ways, but it's often what if thinking. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if I fail? What if this doesn't go well? It's all of these what ifs. And it's a future focused emotion. That's what anxiety is. And it's about getting back in the here and now, away from what if thinking and back to what is in the here and the now. And there are many strategies that you could use. So a strategy that I teach in the 5 resets, it's called Stop, Breathe, Be. And it's a 3-second reset, and we can do it together, you and I, Janet. You're going to stop when you're feeling that doom and gloom and the rumination, like the ruminating thoughts over and over. You're going to stop. You're going to breathe, and you're going to ground yourself in the present moment. If you practice that over and over again, so I practiced it. I first learned it back when I was a medical resident. I was seeing 30 to 40 patients a day, and I would use it every time I would turn the doorknob before entering the patient room. I would say that to myself: stop, breathe, be. And then over and over again. What that does is it primes your brain, and particularly your mind-body connection, to help you stay in the here and now and keep you grounded in the here and now. Over time, when you practice it again and again, so let's say like you are working and every time you hit join Zoom. I mean, I did it before you and I started speaking. I have a grounding exercise that I do to help me stay in the here and now. I do it throughout the day. Every time I'm turning a doorknob, it's, usually like the mundane, repetitive activities.
Right.
You can do it when you're pouring yourself a cup of coffee, when you're washing your hands. There's so many moments in the day that are ripe for stop, breathe, be. And so I bring in that idea of stop, breathe, be because it's a way to get in the here and now. It taps into your mind-body connection. When you tap into your mind-body connection, what that does is it brings a sense of grounding to this present moment. You keep your mind where your feet are. Another strategy that you can try to keep your mind where your feet are is something called sticky feet. Another thing that I write about in the 5 resets. And so you kind of imagine your feet have 100 muscles and 30 bones, which is like a lot of power. And so you imagine your feet like sticky webs on the ground. You're, I don't know, washing dishes, or maybe you're like, you're standing up to present something. I do this also myself when I am presenting. You bring your attention to your feet and you really ground your support. And that helps because it, again, gets you out of what if back to what is. And so constantly doing that a little bit every day, incrementally, it starts training your brain to stay in the here and now. And when you are in the here and now, you're back in your prefrontal cortex, and then you can actually start solving complex problems because you can act. But when you are in that what if thinking, what's going to happen, you're in that amygdala, and we know what the amygdala does. It like just is, cave person mode. It's about survival and self-preservation. So I think another really important first step is to, in addition to doing these strategies, is also to understand that if you are feeling a sense of doom and gloom about the future, fear of the future, that it is normal. Of course you're going to feel this way. And that alone, when you can normalize and validate a difficult experience, you're halfway there. Because then you recognize it as something like, oh, I can, this is really hard. And then you can talk to others, or perhaps you don't want to share with others, and that's fine too. But you can actually then make change. So these are some like very simple strategies that you can try. And the reason that all of this is important is because your brain there's something called neuroplasticity. Again, hate to use a long scientific word, but it basically means that your brain is a muscle, like your bicep. And so things that you do every day, like stop, breathe, be, or sticky feet, or, various breathing exercises I write about in the 5 resets, all of these things actually change your brain. Just like if you did 100 bicep curls, your bicep will get strong. Same thing with your brain. And so your brain is always changing and evolving based on what you do every day. And so choose wisely what you're going to do.
I love that. You shared so many wonderful, tangible ways to like exercises that we could do, but also just ways to reframe. I like that saying, even just recognizing that it's normal to feel anxiety about the future. I think that validation can be incredibly helpful. And I'll be applying the stop, be, and I will use that exercise. I think using that before going into a Zoom room for a lot of our listeners who might be working virtually often, I think is so helpful. Dr. Aditi, can you also talk a bit about regulating stress for anyone who might experience more acute stress, like panic attacks?
Yes. So there are several strategies that you could use. First, if you have that acute debilitating stress, it would be very helpful to first see your doctor, because there might be medications that could help you, right? Like we know that, like for panic disorder, there's certain medications that may or may not be helpful. Talk to your doctor, of course. Now, if you want to use other strategies, we call them adjunct strategies. So there's a couple of techniques that you could use. Stop, breathe, be is a great one, as is sticky feet, because it helps get you out of that mode back into the here and the now. Heart-centered breathing, another great breathing exercise. You put your hand on your heart and you breathe in for a count of 4, out for a count of 7. another breathing exercise. It's 4-7-8 breathing. So many reasons and ways that you can really help modulate your stress response, like with panic attacks. Let's talk a little bit more, deeply about what panic attacks are. It's this like immediate sensation of feeling catastrophic doom and gloom. And it's like you can't control it. It's like the train has left the station and it's like a runaway train. Now, with panic disorder or panic attacks, like that acute debilitating stress, the reason breath work is so important with anxiety or any sort of like mood disorder, but particularly it's very helpful with panic attacks, is because your breath is the only mechanism, the only physiological mechanism, the only bodily function that is under voluntary control and involuntary control. Your brain waves don't do it. Your heart doesn't do it. Your heartbeat, your digestion, blood flow, nothing else in your body is under voluntary and involuntary control. And that makes a difference because your body, when you are having that panic attack, your sympathetic system, because there's two nervous systems in the body. One is your sympathetic nervous system, which is governed by that amygdala that we talked about. It's stress and fight or flight. It's on. And the other system, called the parasympathetic system, which is rest and digest, is off. It's like a light switch. Both systems can't be on together. You either have the sympathetic system on or the parasympathetic system on. And your breath is the toggle between the two. So think about like when you're anxious, your breath, it's fast, it's shallow, and it's like, it's rapid. It's like, what it's like when you're feeling a sense of anxiousness.
Yeah.
Versus when you're feeling calm and like Netflix and chill, when you're just like relaxed, and maybe in the evenings your breath is slow, you're breathing from your belly and it's really deep. Again, you can help modulate that stress response and whether the light switch is on the sympathetic or parasympathetic by really making sure that you are that you're doing these various breathing techniques. So that's also why the breath is a gateway to then help you manage your stress in the here and now.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And it's a skill, of course, like anything, right? Like in the beginning, you're like, oh my God, what's happening? My heart is racing. I'm flushed. When you're feeling that panic. And then when you start using your breath, it's very important. And if you can, try to link a little breath with movement, go for a walk, articulate your feet on the floor as you're walking, movement meditation, like really start thinking about your breathing, and that can help as well.
Yeah, I love that your breath is the toggle between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. The last question that I have for you, Dr. Aditi, is around dealing with burnout. So I know you talked about kind of sometimes taking a trip, maybe doesn't necessarily, a short vacation may not help if you're in a state of burnout. What tips would you have for our listeners in dealing with burnout, maybe specifically if they're feeling it at work?
Couple of things right away. First, protect your sleep like the vital resource it is. Sleep is very therapeutic. It's a therapeutic intervention. And it is very important when you're feeling stress and burnout because your brain is taxed, right? You're having bad days. So you have to figure out a way to have good nights. Typically, sleep is often the first to go when you're feeling stress and burnout. It's, again, often for people, it's the canary symptom. It's like that first tell. So go to sleep early. Aim for a night, typically I say 10 p.m. bedtime for people because the golden hour for good sleep is like 10 to 11. That's considered the golden hour for sleep, for health and wellness, for your heart, etc. But if you're having fragmented sleep, like if you keep waking up multiple times at night because you're anxious or you're burnt out or you're just not feeling good, sleep earlier. So go to bed at 9 p.m. So really think about sleep like a therapeutic intervention. That's first and foremost, and protect it like the vital resource it is. Next, try to get some form of daily movement every single day. I would advise, if you're feeling a sense of burnout, I would advise against like high intensity exercises and just go for walks. Spend 20 minutes every day walking. If you can't do 20 minutes and you feel too fatigued, just do 5 minutes every single day. Because we know that when you are creating a new habit, like say an exercise habit, it's better to do something every day rather than once in a while because it avoids decision fatigue. And then the third thing I would do if you're feeling burnt out is to create some digital boundaries. Very, very important. This little device that we have here, our phones, we are always on our phones. From the minute we open our eyes, often before our second eye is not even open, we're scrolling. We're scrolling our emails, Slack channel, headlines, social media. That is not benign. That has a direct influence on your brain chemistry, and on your stress and burnout. So keep your phone off your nightstand. Keep it in your bedroom. It's not about becoming a digital monk. You want to be engaged in technology, but just give yourself a buffer so it's not on your nightstand. At night, switch your phone to grayscale. That's also a really important tip to create some digital boundaries. And I can show you how to do that. What you do is you simply, I have it here, it just went to gray, and you can learn how to do that. I have it automated. So like 9 p.m., my phone is on grayscale. It helps me avoid scrolling, because guys, like I might know all the science, but I'm still a human being in this world. And like sometimes we all, scroll when you really should be asleep. And so there's always that tension between scrolling and technology and sleep. It's like indirect competition from the minute you wake up all the way until bed. So when you are facing a sense of stress and burnout, particularly for your listeners who are feeling a sense of burnout, you are just so depleted and you are running on fumes, and it's about filling up the tank. And so what are the ways to fill up the tank? These are some strategies you could use. Of course, we have to address the elephant in the room, which is like, why are you feeling burnout? Chances are it's a system-wide issue, right? It's like, again, we talked about people are resilient. It's the systems that burn us out. Systems like parenting demands or impossible work demands or a difficult boss. We know the data shows that having one of the biggest determinants of your mental health is your boss, not your doctor, but your boss. And so really thinking through all of that. But again, when you are feeling a sense of burnout, people may say to you, just get a new job. I mean, come on, but it's not that easy. Of course it's not, because you are so depleted. You need the energy to then make a change. And the way you get that energy, a little bit of like juice in the tank, is by doing a lot of these things that I'm sharing. Because then you will be able to make change happen, because you'll get out of that amygdala mode and back into the prefrontal cortex.
Yes, yeah. That was beautiful. Beautifully stated. Thank you so much, Dr. Aditi. It has been so amazing to have you on the show to talk about stress and burnout, but most importantly, to share with our listeners different ways that we can combat it and the importance of recognizing it. Is there a place that our listeners can find you if they want to learn more or follow you along on your journey?
So you can find me anywhere on social at Dr. Aditi Nerurkar, at DRADITI. Nerurkar. I also have a new Substack you can subscribe to. It's not you, it's your stress. And you can also check out my website, 5resets.com.
Wonderful. Thank you once again for being on our show, Dr. Aditi. It's been amazing, and I hope that our listeners will take away some beautiful tools from this episode.
Thanks, Janet. Such a pleasure to join you.
Thank you. And with that, we will catch you all on the next episode. Before we wrap today's episode, I want to send a shout out to our ABG bestie, Q Nguyen from New Orleans, Louisiana. Thank you, Q, so much for your support. You are amazing. You are the reason why we were able to keep the show going. Thank you so much.